The wind howled through the narrow street as Sarah stared blankly out of the window. Each leaf that fell from the towering oak tree outside felt like another piece of her heart crumbling away. But one leaf still clung stubbornly to its branch, and with it, a spark of hope flickered inside her. She whispered under her breath, "When that leaf falls, I'll be ready to give up." Sarah wasn't always like this. A year ago, she was a vibrant college student full of dreams. Now, she could barely recognize herself. The accident had taken so much from her future, her joy, and most of all, her younger brother, Ethan. Ethan was her best friend, the one person who always believed in her, no matter what. They had grown up together, sharing secrets and planning adventures. On that fateful night, Sarah had promised to drive him home from a late-night party. Just a few miles from their house, a sudden rainstorm caused her to lose control of the car. The last thing she remembered was the sound of breaking glass and Ethan's scream. He never made it. Weeks turned into months, and Sarah's world became a fog of guilt and regret. She isolated herself from friends and family, convinced that she didn't deserve their kindness. In her mind, she had failed the one person she loved the most. As fall approached, Sarah found herself mesmerized by the tree outside her window. Its leaves had always turned the brightest shade of red, but this year they seemed dull, like her life. Day after day, she watched as they drifted to the ground, one by one. And every time a leaf fell, Sarah's pain deepened. But that last leaf, it refused to let go. Sarah started waiting for it to fall, almost willing it to. She believed that when it finally dropped, she would have permission to give up too. It was the only thing holding her together, this fragile connection to nature's rhythm. One evening, her mother came into her room. She hadn't spoken much to Sarah since the accident, not because she didn't care, but because she didn't know how to reach her. "I saw you staring at that tree again," her mother said gently, sitting beside her. "What are you waiting for?" Sarah hesitated, her voice trembling. "I don't know, Mom. I guess I'm waiting for the last leaf to fall." Her mother sighed, her eyes welling up with tears. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, "we're all waiting for something, but holding on to that pain won't bring Ethan back." Sarah turned to her mother for the first time in months, seeing the same grief reflected in her eyes. She had been so wrapped up in her own sorrow that she hadn't realized how much her family was hurting too. That night, Sarah lay awake thinking about what her mother had said. Maybe waiting for that leaf to fall wasn't the answer. Maybe, like the leaf, she had to find the strength to hold on a little longer, not for herself, but for the people who still needed her. The next morning, Sarah looked out the window again. The last leaf was still there, hanging by a thread. For the first time, she smiled. Maybe it wasn't about the leaf falling after all. Maybe it was about her choice to stand, despite everything trying to pull her down. She took a deep breath and opened the window. The cold autumn air rushed in, filling her lungs with life. And as she watched, the wind carried the last leaf away. But Sarah didn't feel like giving up. Instead, she whispered, "I'm still here." Sometimes the things we hold on to the tightest are the very things keeping us from healing. Life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass or the last leaf to fall. It's about learning to keep going, even when it hurts. The story teaches that while grief and pain are inevitable, healing comes from within, and it often starts when we realize that life goes on despite the hardships. Holding on to hope, even when it seems impossible, can be the first step to recovery.